Hey peeps, what's up? Munchie here, back with another video, and in this video I'm going to show you how you can upgrade the internal SSD on your 2015 MacBook Pro to a M.2 NVMe SSD. So all the relevant links, whatever we are going to use in this video, everything is in the description of the video, and here it is. You can see I am running a 2 TB NVMe SSD on my 2015 MacBook Pro over here. Now do note that the video is divided into chapters, and those you can find in the description of this video as well. Now the first question you might ask me is, hey Manchi, why do I need to install a M.2 NVMe SSD? Well, the short and simple answer is Apple's storage is super expensive. Next up, your master resource for this video, or if you need any other information which is not available in this video, you will find it in this MacRumors thread. This is the Bible for installing a NVMe SSD on your MacBook Pros. Then you're going to ask me that what laptops can be upgraded. So you can do this on your MacBook Air models from mid 2013 to 2017 and all MacBook Pro models from late 2013 to mid 2015. You're going to read something about your boot ROM has to be updated. So make sure that on your Apple SSD you have at least macOS Big Sur. That is the one which brought us to the newest boot ROM which supports NVMe SSDs on these MacBook Pros and MacBook Airs from way back in 2013. How do you find out the boot ROM version? Well, you need to go into the Apple menu. So top left, Apple logo, then go into about this Mac, and you might see something called system report. If you do not see that, because I am running macOS Ventura, I will go into more info, and on this general page I need to scroll down, and here is the option system report. Once I go into system report, this system firmware version, this is your boot ROM. So this needs to be above a specific version which they do mention in this thread over here on Mac Rumors. But the short answer here is make sure that on your SSD, the Apple SSD which is inside your MacBook Pro or the MacBook Air, you have macOS Big Sur or above. That's it. Another important thing to note over here is that this process is not going to work if you have OpenCore Legacy Patcher installed on your MacBook. So initially I was trying this with macOS Ventura installed on my 2015 MacBook Pro with OpenCore Legacy Patcher. The cloning process did not work. I tried Carbon Copy Cloner, I tried the disk utility in recovery mode, it did not work. So you will need to be on the maximum macOS version which Apple supports officially for your device. In my case, it is macOS Monterey. So that is what eventually worked for me, which is why you might see that I have a 128 GB SSD on my MacBook Pro, whereas I think this one comes with 256 base. So I had to get another original Apple SSD so that I could upgrade or make this video. Now just to give you a brief overview of all the steps we're going to perform in this video to upgrade the internal SSD from Apple's proprietary to a bigger M.2 NVMe SSD on this 2015 MacBook Pro, we're going to take our new SSD, put it inside the USB external enclosure with the heatsink and stuff, and then we are going to format it to APFS, which is Apple file system. Then we are going to boot into recovery on the MacBook, clone the internal SSD to this new SSD. Then we're going to boot from this new SSD to make sure that everything was cloned without any issues. And then the last step would be to take out the back from your 2015 MacBook Pro, remove the Apple SSD, and then we are going to use the adapter which we have to install this new M.2 NVMe SSD as the internal storage on our 2015 MacBook Pro. Next up, let us see what are the things which you need to update your MacBook to the SSD, which is our NVMe SSD. So for starters, of course, you do need the M.2 2280 NVMe SSD, and I am using the Sabrent one over here. Now do note the best ones which I have found after reading the MacRumors forum. I have linked all of those in the description of this video. The other one which has good reputation is the SK Hynix. Then of course we need our adapter which is going to convert the proprietary Apple SSD port to our NVMe which we are using over here. Then because we are going to clone our internal hard disk to this, we need the M.2 NVMe SSD enclosure, and this is the one which I am using. And last but not the least, to remove the back on your MacBooks, you do need a special screwdriver. I have this whole set over here, but you do not have to buy the whole set. So you need the P5 1.2 millimeter 5-star screwdriver. That is what you need. And then to remove the SSD from the motherboard on your MacBooks, you might also need a Torx T5 screwdriver. Links to all of these can be found in the description of this video. The next question which I will get a lot is which M.2 NVMe SSD to buy. Now the thread does list a lot of SSDs on the first page, but do note this information is pretty old. After going through at least 50 or 60 pages, I can tell you that the most recommended one you will find is the SK Hynix P31 Gold. Then you have the Sabrent, which I am using. You need to get the blue one. And if you are in Europe or in your UK, you do not get this SK Hynix P31. Then you have to get the Exceria one. Again, links to all of these can be found in the description of the video. You will also see a lot of discussion about power draw, because you can get the Samsung latest ones like the 980s working absolutely fine, but the power draw from them is a bit more than expected. In my case, this is how much battery I lost with the lid just turned off, system not shut down. So after 8 hours, I think I had 1% of battery drain. Now do note my 2015 MacBook Pro is not running the original Apple battery. I think 2 years ago or maybe 1.5 years ago, I replaced the battery with one from newer tech. So this is not the original Apple battery either inside this 2015 MacBook Pro. Next up, while we're talking about closing the lid, I think 2014 MacBook Pro models have the issue wherein if you close the lid, that is you hibernate the system, it doesn't wake up, it causes a kernel panic. There is a solution for that which you can find in this very thread. You have to turn off hibernation, unfortunately, but on the 2015s, no such issue. I haven't faced any kernel panic or kernel crash when I've tried to wake up my device. Another important thing I would like to mention about the SSDs or the NVMe SSD which you may want to buy is that there's no point in getting the PCIe 4.0 for a 2015 MacBook Pro. I think it'll work, but it doesn't make sense because the 2015 15-inch supports a maximum of 4 lanes with PCIe 3.0 speed. So even if you put a PCIe 4.0 NVMe SSD, it'll still be working at PCIe 3.0 speed. Now, on the other hand, the early 2015 13-inch MacBook Pro supports 4 lanes at PCIe 2.0 speed. So again, before you go out there, spend money on the latest SSD, make sure that you get the SSD which works best for you, because sometimes latest is not the greatest. Next up, you will ask me, hey Manchi, what adapter should I buy? Now, the thread is going to say that you have the Sintech, which is the best. But again, do note this thread is years old. It hasn't been updated in years. And at this point in 2023, even the non-Sintech adapters are good enough, as you can see by the reviews on Amazon. Me personally, I did get the Sintech one, so this is the one which I am using. But if you find something else which is cheaper, has good reviews, feel free to go for it. Most of them are the same by now. They have caught up with Sintech. And yes, it is recommended to go with the longer one, but again, I went with the shorter one because this is the one which I was getting for next day delivery. Next up, what external enclosure should you get for your M.2 NVMe SSD for cloning purposes? Now, I used this one. Feel free to use any one which you want to. This one has good reviews. The Sabrent one has good reviews. But do note, find something which has a cooling system with it, the cooling pads, because the SSD is going to generate some heat when you are cloning it. And I have had instances wherein the cloning process just stopped because the SSD overheated in the enclosure. I was not using the cooling pad which they provide, so this cooling pad, I was not using it and it overheated. So again, make sure you are using the cooling system which is provided with your external NVMe enclosure. And of course, you can or you will have to remove that thermal pad once the cloning process has finished successfully, and we are going to put this SSD, the NVMe SSD, inside the 2015 MacBook Pro. Now, another thing to note over here is that the enclosure which I got came with a USB-C to USB-C cable. However, the MacBook Pro over here, the 2015 one which I have, does not have a USB-C port. So I had to get a USB-A to USB-C cable as well, and with that it worked absolutely fine. Next up, what toolkit to get? Now, I already own this Tecton kit, so this worked absolutely fine for me. However, if you do not own a kit to open your MacBook Pro, because they do have some super secure screws in the back, all you need is a 1.2 mm P5 pentalobe screwdriver and a T5 Torx. So the P5 pentalobe you're going to use to open the back, and then the T5 Torx is for the SSD screw. And you would also need this plastic spudger to disconnect the battery. However, if you have a guitar pick, anything plastic which you can use, you might not need this. So you can do with this kit as well, or if you want to get something better, you are a tinkerer like me who likes to open up their gadgets, then this might be the toolkit for you. Alright, so here it is. This is our SSD enclosure, and all I need to do is move this over here, pop this guy out, and then the enclosure is going to come out. This enclosure does come with this rubber plug so that you do not need a screwdriver or anything to install your NVMe SSD onto this external enclosure. So we're going to take out our SSD from the box, and then we are going to line up the slot. And once the slot has lined up, we are going to push it in a little and you will hear a click. But before that, it is advisable that this rubber plug which you see, you attach it over here on the slot on the SSD, and now I can push it in. I heard the click and bam, there it is. It has been installed successfully inside the enclosure. And then the next thing we're going to do is take this back cover, line it up, and then slide it over. Bam, here it is. The SSD has been installed in this enclosure, and now all you need is a USB-A to USB-C cable. And the next thing we're going to do is connect this SSD to our MacBook and format it, and then we're going to clone it. Now, once we've connected our SSD enclosure to our MacBook, we can go ahead and go into Finder, then we can go into Applications, here and scroll down, go into Utilities, and we're going to open the Disk Utility application. Once you are in Disk Utility, first thing you need to do is tap on this View option and say Show All Devices. Now, as you can see, this here is my internal drive, which is 256 GB. This here is the new drive, the NVMe from Sabrent, which is 2 TB, and this is the one which we are going to eventually install inside our MacBook. But first things first, we need to erase this and make it compatible with MacBook Pro. So we are going to select the top level. Do not select the volume, select the top level, then go into erase and give it any name which you want to in the name. The format you have to keep it as APFS, and the scheme is going to be GUID partition map, and then we are going to erase it, and this process will take some time, so you have to be patient. But once the process has finished successfully, you will get an appropriate message, and as you can see right now, we are getting formatting the disk as macOS extended. Alright, so as you can see, we are now getting the message that erase process is complete. Click on done to continue, and operation here was successful. So we are going to say done, and at this point you can close the disk utility. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to clone this new bigger NVMe SSD to the internal drive. So for that we are going to use the disk utility which is provided by Apple, but we are going to use it in recovery mode. So how do you enter recovery mode? For starters, restart your Mac, and then as soon as you hear the chime, you need to press the command R together and make sure that your new SSD is connected to your Mac. So we're going to select restart, and then as soon as the screen goes black, we are going to press and hold Command R. Now, once you hold Command R, you should land up on a screen like this. This is going to be your recovery. So here it is, we are in the recovery. As you can see on the top left over here, it says recovery. We are going to go into disk utility. This is the last option, and then select continue. Now this is going to detect all the drives which are attached to our Mac right now. Go on the arrow besides disk utility, tap on this arrow and say show all devices. So as you can see, this here is my internal SSD, and this here is the new 2 TB bigger NVMe drive, which is right now showing up as external because we have connected it using a adapter. Now herein you need to select this container disk. How do you know this is the one you select? The type will show as APFS container, and then we are going to say restore, and we have to restore it from the internal SSD which we have. In our case, it is mic. It is selected by default, and then we are going to say restore. And there it is. You can see that the restore process has started. We are getting validating target, validating source, and now it is replicating it. So this here is cloning our external NVMe SSD with our internal one right now. Again, the process will take some time, so you have to be patient. Now, as you can see, previously we had one replicating, then after a few minutes, we have the second line of replicating. So that is showing us that things are moving forward. Again, all of this is going to depend on the speed of your new SSD, the speed of your USB port, and a bunch of other things. So again, make sure you are patient, and also connect your Mac if it is battery powered to a power source. You do not want your MacBook to die on you, run out of battery while you're cloning your internal hard disk to the new, bigger M.2 NVMe SSD. And there it is. You can see that we have got the message that restored target device into whatever the path of the new NVMe SSD is. And we also got the message that operation was successful. We can now select done and let us check out the containers in here, try to expand it and see what is going on over here on this drive. So there it is. You can see that we have mic over here, which is the name of my internal SSD, and we have mic data and mic over here as well on the new one. So things are looking good so far. At this point, feel free to close this disk utility and tap on this Apple logo on the top left. Once you do that, you're going to get a bunch of options. We are going to say restart. Now, as soon as you select restart, you have to press the option key once you hear the chime. So let us do that. Let us select restart. It restarted. As soon as I hear the chime, I am going to press and hold the option key, which should give me the boot up options. I hear the chime, I'm pressing and holding the option key on my Mac and waiting for the boot up options. So bam, here it is. You can see that we have mic. This is clearly our internal drive and this is our external drive. Let us select this one and then tap on the arrow and see if we boot into the macOS or not. Now do note that you are booting your MacBook off an external drive, so the boot up will be longer than what it is from an internal drive. So again, patience is the key over here. I am seeing the loading bar and I'll be back once the loading bar has finished loading. So here it is, we are on the home screen and we've successfully booted into Mac OS. Let me enter my password and then we can press the enter key. Hopefully I entered the password correctly. I still remember it. And there it is, we are in disk utility and looks like everything was cloned like a boss. Let us go into the wallpapers. Yes, my wallpapers are here. My folder is also present over here, which I had created, even though there's nothing in here. And let us go into the disk utility and we can go into applications and disk utility and wait for everything to show up. There it is. You can see by default it showed up the external drive, which means we are booting off the external drive right now. Everything has been cloned successfully. So success. The next step is to open up your MacBook and then we're going to remove the older smaller SSD and replace it with the bigger M.2 NVMe SSD. But before that, make sure you tap on the Apple logo on the top left and then we are going to say shut down. Do not remove your external SSD right now, just shut down your Mac and then once it has shut down successfully, then you can disconnect your new bigger M.2 NVMe SSD from the USB port. Now, of course, any mod you do, any tech activity you do, something you do which you're not supposed to do as per Apple, you will run into issues. I also ran into an issue wherein when I was cloning the internal SSD to the new M.2 NVMe bigger SSD, I was not using the heatsink on the external NVMe enclosure. What happened? Well, I think the SSD overheated and then the process stuck. The process just sat there for around 25, 30, 45 minutes, an hour, nothing happened. So eventually I shut down my system, disconnected the SSD, and my system, of course, rebooted, but the SSD was not being detected. So I thought I had killed this NVMe SSD. But upon some searching, I came across this page from Carbon Copy Cloner, which says that when we are cloning it, it is using Apple's APFS replicator. And if it does not end gracefully, as in it does not finish the process, the destination volume is essentially corrupted. Because the ASR from Apple does not erase the volume to put it back in pre-task condition, it becomes unresponsive, that is the SSD, and even disk utility cannot load it. As they say, it looks scarier, but the solution is mentioned here as well. So all you have to do is disconnect it from your Mac, give it some time, and then reattach it, and eventually your Mac is going to detect it. For me, it took around 45 minutes. I disconnected the external NVMe SSD from the enclosure and from the USB cable from the MacBook. Then I went away, did something, came back after an hour, saw that it was being detected. I did have to format it again. So that is the only issue which I faced during this upgrading of the internal SSD to a bigger NVMe SSD on my 2015 MacBook Pro. The next thing we need to do is we need to remove the back here of this MacBook Pro so that we can remove the Apple SSD and replace it with the new bigger NVMe SSD which we have. Do note you have a total of 10 screws on the back, but the two screws over here near the hinge in the middle are of different sizes. So make sure you keep them separate, and of course you are going to need a specialized tool to take out all these 10 screws. And in case you're wondering how would I keep my screws organized, the toolbox which I have does come with this magnetic pad which comes pretty handy, and all I have to remember is that this here is the top part of this back on the MacBook Pro, because these two screws, as I mentioned earlier, are of a different size. That being said, the next thing we're going to do is we can remove the back from the MacBook Pro. Now with the back removed, the next thing we have to do is disconnect the battery. So in my case, I have to peel this off, and this here is the battery connector of this 2015 MacBook Pro. I recommend you use something other than metal to pry this up and remove the battery connector. You can use a plastic, a guitar pick, something wooden, but do not use anything metal, and all you need to do is pry it up a little bit from both sides, and eventually this should pop out. So let me try this prying thing over here. Bam, here it is. You can see that we have successfully disconnected the battery. Why are we doing this? We're doing this because we are going to swap out the SSD, and you do not want any power running through your MacBook when you're doing that. Now, once we have made sure that the battery here is disconnected, the next thing we need to do is remove the SSD or the Apple OEM storage. Now, this here is the Apple SSD. Of course, it is made by Samsung, and you would need another special tool. This, I think, is a T5 or a P5 screw driver, and we are going to remove the screw. And again, I'm going to use my magnetic tray over here to put the screw in place, and then lift this thing up gently and pull it out. Bam, there it is. We have successfully removed the original SSD from this 2015 MacBook Pro. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, this SSD here is made by Samsung. The next thing we have to do is we have to install our new 2 TB SSD. This here is the one from Sabrent, and we are going to use an adapter. Now, why are we using an adapter? Because this is the ports or the cutout on the Apple SSD. You can see this here, it's not able to focus. Let me bring out the original Apple SSD. You can see, and this is the one which we are using right now. So the cut does not match, which is why we have to use this adapter. So first of all, we are going to put in the adapter in place. It snapped into place, and then we are going to slide this in over here gently and then give it a little push. Everything needs to be easy and gentle, and eventually you will notice that the small circle cut over here, the semicircle cut over here, lines up with the slot of the screw. And then the next thing you have to do is take the screw which we just removed and screw it back into place. Now, once you've attached the screw, make sure that you do reconnect the battery. So again, give it a little push, be gentle, it will snap into place, easy peasy, and then put the back on and put the screws back onto the back of this MacBook Pro. Now, once you have installed the new M.2 NVMe SSD as the internal disk on your 2015 MacBook Pro, it's time to turn on this bad boy, and hopefully you are going to boot into your macOS, the one which we had cloned. Now, remember at the beginning of the video, I had told you that the 2015 MacBook Pro supports 4 lanes of PCIe 3.0. How do you confirm that? Well, for that, you will go into the Apple logo on the top left about this Mac, then you will see the option of system report. In my case, I'm running Ventura, so I will go into general, and then if I scroll down, I see system report. Herein, in the system report, if you go into NVMe Express, you will see that I have the Sabrent, but the link width here is 4. This means that my PCIe 3.0 with 4 lanes is working absolutely fine using this Sintech adapter. Now, in case you're not getting the correct link width over here, specifically for the 15-inch 2015 MacBook Pro, which does support PCIe 3.0 with 4 lanes, then it could be the adapter. So in that case, you might have to try out another adapter from Amazon. And the 2015 13-inch MacBook Pro will show 2 in link width because it supports PCIe 3.0 with 2 lanes. And there it is, peeps. That is how you upgrade your 2015 MacBook Pro from Apple's proprietary SSDs to a bigger, cheaper M.2 NVMe SSD. And if you want to know how you can install macOS Ventura on your unsupported 2015 MacBook Pro, we do have a video for that, which can be found in the description of this video.